Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint. Well, you're in for a treat today because I have got one of Australia's leaders interior stylists. She is currently working on a range of different clients, Bek Shepard. She is based in Melbourne and she is both an interior and prop stylist and works for some of the biggest brands in the interiors world, and including working with interior designers and architects. And this conversation really is her pulling back the curtain on what it's like to work today, actively in this whole world, exactly what a shoot looks like, the types of prepping that goes into it, how she charges for her time and her services, what her team looks like, how to source from different brands, for your shoots, everything. We're talking about everything to do with interior styling. And I trust that you're going to really get a lot of value out of this and learn about her journey too. So please enjoy my conversation with Bek Shepard. Hi, Bek. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. This is such a little treat for me because I know of you through our mutual colleague / friend, photographer Chris Warnes. He's always spoken so highly of you. And our paths have never really crossed because you're based in Melbourne. When I was styling, I was, more in Sydney, and now I'm in Byron. But I'm very familiar with your work. You create beautiful work and really excited to share more of your story. So I always like to start at the beginning because I think it's really interesting to learn about people's journeys, where they began, and kind of that those early years, like where did you grow up? What type of home did you live in? Did you have creative parents? What did that look like for you sort of in those years, kind of before you started to have to make a decision about what you're going to do post high school?
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on your podcast today. It's really lovely to chat with you. This is my first podcast, so I'm really looking forward to it. A little bit nervous, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. So I think if we go back to like early days, so when I was young, I'm from a family of 4 in Melbourne. Both my parents, when I was younger, we used to live at the back of a shop in Glen Ferry. They both had a business in antiques. So Dad is a second generation antique restorer. My mother is quite creative as well. So I think sort of that love for quality furniture and interiors sort of, started when I was a lot younger. I've always been a fairly creative child. So I have a lot of memories of, making crafty things like the little, I think they're called little diorama boxes where you sort of have little interior worlds. So I used to do that. And I also have memories of going through Maya, and I used to choose outfits and sort of hang them on the same rack together. Like I'd choose a pair of pants and a top, and I sort of remember doing that whilst my mum was shopping. Originally I grew up inner city Melbourne, and then we moved out to the eastern suburbs after that. And then I think the interest in sort of styling began when I was a young adult. I went back and studied visual merchandising, and styling was a small element of that, and assisted a couple of stylists. And then I really, fell in love with it. And I thought, this is it. This is the path that I want to be doing. And I think for me at that time, it was quite organic. Like the doors sort of started to open quite quickly. So I was really lucky. And I think just always had a real love for all things design and creativity.
So when you were at school and having to make the decision about what you were going to do after school, I mean, I'm presumed that you probably didn't know what interior styling was at that point, and you sort of touched on doing visual merchandising. Did you study that? Where did you study that? And what were you thinking that you might go down in terms of those, when you're making that decision at high school?
Yeah, so I actually, which a lot of people will probably be surprised by this, knowing who I am now, but I actually left school quite early. I left school before my BCE. I didn't really have a clear direction on what I wanted to be doing. So I ended up working. I went to TAFE. I sort of studied a couple of subjects. It wasn't until I was working in retail that I was introduced to visual merchandising. And I quite enjoyed the creativity of it, setting up different displays. And then I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to go and study this as a subject. So I went back as a mature age student at Swinburne and started doing visual merchandising. Like I said, started doing styling, and I thought this looks like a really great potential job to be doing. And I actually met, at the time, I worked with a friend of mine was a photographer, and he said, look, why don't you come along to a styling set and see what you think? And it was, I'm not sure if you know of him, but Glenn Probstall was the stylist. And I mean, he is just incredible,
Well,
incredible stylist.
he's like the best
And
of the best.
yeah, and he's like incredible to watch. And I remember just watching him at the time, and it was the photographer was Sharon Cairns, and they were shooting for Inside Out, and it was just amazing. They were shooting on film, so this would have been like the last days of film. And I'm like, wow, this guy is some sort of magician. Like, how is he doing this? And it was so effortless and so beautiful. And yeah, from that point on, I just was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I think, sorry if I'm going off topic here, but I think the first thing I started to do was I started to reach out to stylists that I liked the work of, and started to see if they wanted an assistant. And then from that point on, you started to assist and you started to sort of learn the trade. And then it all sort of, I guess, flowed on from that point into choosing it as a career choice. But I think at school, like early days, I didn't really know what I was going to be doing. It wasn't until I sort of had that work experience that I was like, okay, this looks like something. I think sometimes if you're not really introduced to it, you might not know it actually exists out there.
Yeah, I think that's true, particularly interior styling. I think still to
Yeah.
this day, even though I feel like I talk about it all the time on this podcast, I still meet people and they don't really know and understand what it is. And,
No, that's right.
yeah, it's still kind of quite unknown. So just give us a little bit of a glimpse into that shoot with Glenn Probstall and Sharon Cairns, because they, very much, and I think when they were doing those shoots for Inside Out, like they were kind of at the zenith. I mean, they're still both creating amazing work, but I think that editorial sphere is, very creative in terms of what they can create. What sort of things were you picking up on that shoot that you were kind of like, wow, okay, that's really interesting that he did it that way? Or even just the way that they would communicate with each other? Like, were the things that you were noticing or kind of taking mental notes of that you were like, that was really eye-opening for you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it quite well, but it was 15 years ago. So it was the very beginning of my introduction to this sort of world. Um, from what I remember seeing of them, it was very effortless. So they had a real connection together, I think, as a creative duo that they almost didn't really need to, and you'll probably have experienced this too in your styling life. When you're on a set, you almost don't need to communicate with the other person because you're kind of understanding each other. So I could definitely see that. And just, I remember he had so many props for the shots. Like it was tables and tables of propping, which was amazing. Like I don't even know if I'd be on a set these days with that many props. Like it was huge. And it was actually at the time was on top of Bromley's. It was Bromley's old art space, which is on top of JB Hi-Fi on Chapel Street. And it was just an incredible building. Like it was really kind of decrepit in the most beautiful way. And they just did these beautiful spreads. And I think it was also the energy of, it was a long day. And I like that sort of physical aspect of what we do. There's like, it's always something happening. It's never really boring. It's like always interesting. And yeah, I just think just those two, and like Sharon's like, she's incredible person, incredible photographer. And it was just, as someone inexperienced, just seeing those two was, very inspiring. and very much something that I'm like, I want to be a part of this world.
Yeah. Um, and so, who did you end up doing assisting work for?
So I ended up the main styles that I assisted. I actually sort of made a bit of a move into the commercial world. Her name was Melinda Brady. She was an incredible stylist. Still a really good friend of mine now, and I assisted her on quite a few jobs, and like that was just definitely I think learning the craft of styling, like really the learning how to pin things properly, how to fill things properly, how to layer, um, you know, relationships with the client, dealings with photographers, and she was a really great person to sort of learn the ropes from. Um, and then I didn't assist for very long. I think it was only a few months until I started to pick up my own clients. And then, I mean, for that first year or two, you're sort of blending between assisting, doing your own jobs, assisting, doing your own jobs, until you really start to establish yourself. I mean, you're forever learning, aren't you? You never, even 15 years later, I'm still learning from the creatives that I work with. But yeah, she was a wonderful person to assist, very generous with her time and her knowledge.
So, for people who are not so familiar with interior styling and what the difference is between editorial styling and commercial styling, can you just explain that,
Mm-hmm.
what the difference is and what kind of shoots? I think most people would probably understand editorial styling, but maybe even just give your take on that, and
Yeah,
commercial styling, and what kind of clients it was for when you were sort of doing it in those early days,
yeah,
and yeah, and I guess the difference of approach as well, the way that you approach those types of shoots, and even yeah, a little bit of the process.
yeah. So it's funny. 15 years ago, they were completely different. A commercial shoot to an editorial shoot, to me, aesthetically felt very different. Over the years, and it might have something to do with maybe the way we're living and social media, they've sort of become, and I don't know if you agree with me, but they've started to blend. So a lot of the campaign shoots you're doing now for, say, brands, which is typically commercial, they're wanting a bit of an editorial lifestyle flair. So traditionally speaking, editorial would be someone's home, very relaxed, quite creative, I would think as well. Um, and it's usually published. So it'll be online print. I think back 15 years ago, it would have been only print. But then your commercial would be a brand only. So say a brand will come to me with a product, or to us stylists with a product that they want to capture. It will be there's probably a bit more of a guidelines, I would say, that you need to follow because you're also selling this product. Um, so I think that would probably be the difference, and the process. The process is different too as a stylist, because you're not just trying to make the image look beautiful like you are with editorial. You're also trying to sell something in a commercial space.
Yeah.
Does that answer well, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess an example of that would be, because I know that, I mean, I don't really do these types of shoots, and I haven't done, well, I deliberately didn't do them because I didn't want to do this type of styling. But I know that when I speak to Chris, and like he's done campaigns with, say, a bed linen company such as Sheridan. Lots
Mhm.
of Australian people would know Sheridan. For the international listeners, I mean, it's a very established Australian brand of bed linen and towels and things, and there would be
Yeah.
styling and shooting things, what they would call back of packet. So it would be that, the in terms of the way that the bed is made, it needs to be very representational of like what it would look on somebody's bed, so that when they're looking at the back of the packet in a department store, for
Yeah.
instance, that
Yeah.
they understand. Because obviously, when it's folded up in a packet, they don't understand, well, what's the print pattern going to look like, what's the scale of that. And so to shoot it in a space, a studio, so that the full bed is made and they can really see like, oh, this is what the pillowcases will look like with the quilt cover. And I think that's kind of like an example of it, because it needs to be
Yeah.
quite representational. You don't want it to be too, like arty or creative
Correct.
that people don't understand. But what am I getting in this packet? So I know
Yeah,
that
that's
that's an example of more commercial styling, where it's really, or it might be a stack of tiles or whatever, and then you got the hand towel with the other towel. So it's, people understand like, oh, I see the proportion of these, or I see the pattern repeat, or like how big it is, or whatever. So I guess that's like an example of the commercial, like one example of a commercial styling.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And
So
it's slightly different. Sorry, it's a slightly different skill set as well. When you're styling for commercial, you really have to understand things of like pinning, filling. Like I'm talking from a textiles point of view, how to work with certain fabrics, um, placement, light, and also keeping in the back of your mind, I am the consumer. What is it that I want to be seeing in this image? Is it, a detail on a glass that I can't see in the packet? Is it a detail, like you said, of the bed linen that when I'm looking at the packet I can't see? Where editorial is very much more about the feel and the emotional connection. It's very organic. The pieces that, they're very like, I guess more human in a way, more lifestyle. And it's a much more layered, I think, too, editorial seems to be.
and so can you explain pinning and filling? What is that?
So for the last 15 years of my career, the main thing that I have styled has actually been linen and textiles. I have a real love for working with different fabrics. So I guess the difference would be when you're styling something for, say, back a pack or of commercial space, you really need to have in the back of your mind is, am I seeing what I need to see on this product? So you mentioned about pinning and filling. So pinning would be making sure that all that linen, like when I'm going to put the linen on the bed, I need to make sure that the underneath is pinned up properly. I need to make sure I've got the right filling in place. Am I using a woolen doona? Am I using a down doona? What's going to give me the right effect that I want to create? Is it relaxed linen? Is it structured? And then we need to make sure we've got the right pillows. So there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes with my assistants and steaming correctly, and we're pinning correctly, and we're folding. When we're making the bed, we're also making sure that, and this is just a bed, for example, it could be a different product, but the way the light hits the fabric, they're moving the fabric in a certain way. So there's a lot of different. It's a really is, yeah. You're always kind of in the back of your mind: is this product being represented beautifully, according to my client's brief, really? And then the same thing would go with, whether it's fragrances or it's glassware, am I placing things correctly? Am I capturing this bottle beautifully? The pieces I'm using to put with this, say, bottle of fragrance, are they, supporting it beautifully? Are they communicating to it in some way? Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good way to explain it without someone actually being on set watching, because so much goes on there.
Well, I know that Chris always says that, you do it so, so well. And I know that it has
So,
always been the thing that I have not had patience for is beds.
yeah,
I get
I
so impatient with the fabric, and because there is like, I think you've got to
yeah,
have a level of patience and a level of calm, and like, you just
you
got to
do.
be very methodical with it. And that is not my skill set.
Oh, that's okay. I think it's also just a lot of practice too, and also being showed by the right stylist how to do things, and also it's different fabrics. Like certain fabrics you can't make look a certain way no matter how much you try. And there's also we also don't have 6 hours to work on one bed, say. Like we have a certain amount of time that we have to get the shots done, so you can only do what you can do. But yeah, I find it very relaxing to do. And I don't know, it's weird. I just really enjoy linen textiles. I mean, of all the things you could have an interest in, it's probably that. Like,
So, as you mentioned, though, you do style other things,
I
and
do,
you do
yes.
all of it so beautifully. So, can you run us through? Because I just think it would be really helpful for people
Yeah,
to kind of get a sense of, let's take, I don't know, take what a client approaches to you. They want to book you for a shoot.
yeah,
Let's say it's a bed linen company. And you're going to be doing let's run through like a commercial shoot. It's going to be stuff that they're going to be using on their website, social media. So how much of a brief are they giving you? How much of that are you like bringing your own creative vision to? What is that process? Can you kind of like just run us through that process of what
sure.
happens once a client says, okay, we've got a shoot, are you available? Then what
We
happens
want.
next?
Okay, so it does depend really on the brand. So it could be if it's an established brand, they've likely got a creative director or an art director or someone who has a very clear understanding of what the vision is for this campaign or back and pack, whatever it be. If it's a younger brand, or they might just want a fresh approach, they might come to me and they say, look, this is literally the product we've got. You've got free reign. These are sort of, our what we hope to achieve. This is our website. Or maybe they come to me and go, please help. We have no idea what we're actually doing and we need you. So but usually this, I guess they're kind of similar in the way that someone will give me the linen. There will be some sort of idea on sourcing. So my job as a stylist will be, just say if I'm not art directing, I'm just purely styling. They'll come to me with the product. They'll have a bit of an idea on sort of look and feel that they want to create. And it's my job as a stylist to go and source what I need to put in there to complement the linen or to complement the product. So it might be lights, side tables, homewares. I might even have the brief where I need to set design or choose wall colors or flooring options. It might be my role that I need to help choose a suitable location and plan out where all these particular beds or products are going to be photographed. So then from there, once I've sort of sourced and done, all my selections of bits and pieces I want to bring in, we'll have sign off from our client. And once we have sign off, it's then up to my production team to go and organize everything that my heart desires. So, which usually we get most pieces. There's always sometimes a couple of things in a brief that are unusual that are always hard to find. But we have incredible retail. I'm sure you do too. Retail and supplier relationships who are just so accommodating with our shoots, and we usually source from all over Australia, even international as well for our shoots. So we make sure that every single brand that we are working with are somewhat different because they all kind of have similar briefs, but we don't want them all to look the exact same. Especially when I'm working with multiple brands of the same product as well. It's really important that I make sure that I keep them individual. And so from that point on, we'll get all our sourcing. My team will organize everything and we'll bring it in to shoot. So whether we're on location or whether we're in a studio, we usually spend the morning, the first hour or two, bumping everything in, getting all our lighting set up. And then our day will be mainly shot list from 1 to 20 to 30, whatever it needs to be. And we'll sort of set up, each shot that we need to do, capture it alongside the photographer. I always work side by side with the photographer to make sure that as they're framing up, that I'm moving the product properly to frame, or whether I'm, steaming out an extra crease that we might have missed when we're prepping, making sure that the pillow's in the right position. It is a very busy job. Like you were going from start to finish, which is great. I love. And we're, always communicating with our client. We're bouncing ideas together. Do we like this frame? And we just got a nice shot list that we're just ticking off. And at the end of the day, we pack it all down and we get on out of there and no one ever knows we were in the building or on the location. And we're kilos lighter.
Yeah. And I'm curious because, like I said, it's been a while since I've done these types of shoots.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious to see like what has changed, what's different or not. So with the shot list, would you be creating that shot list and getting approval for that? And are you doing like sketches for each individual shot or some of the key shots? Like, are you creating concept
Yeah.
designs, concept boards, mood boards for the shots? Does it depend on the
Yes.
clients? What's that looking
You
like?
are. Yes, you are. If there isn't if I'm being commissioned as an art director and a stylist, so it really depends on the brand. I personally, I'm either commissioned as just styling, and I'm working side by side with the creative director of the company, and we are sort of fleshing out all that information together, and we're bouncing ideas, and they've kind of got an idea of all their frames, and I'm sourcing, and then we're coming back and we're signing off things together. Or when I do the art direction and the styling, just myself, yes, I concept everything. So all the frames, all the different angles, the set. Um, I'm communicating with photographer, kind of doing all of that sort of role. And like, it really does depend on what the client wants. Not every client needs that. And also sometimes even if they do have an art director, creative director, you do find that you're sort of taking on that role too, because that's just natural of, I've got 15 years of experience in the industry. I've got a wealth of knowledge that I'm very happy to share. But it's always a very collaborative role in our industry. Never one idea is the best idea. It's really working together with the full team.
And I'm curious as well, because I think it was much more blurred in this idea of art direction as well when I was working a lot.
Yeah.
Are you charging separately for that? Like, are you saying,
Yes.
do you want a stylist or do you want a stylist and an
Yeah.
art director, and you're
Yes.
pricing accordingly?
Yes. Yeah. It's two different roles. It's not, I mean, if you commission someone like myself and I've got the experience, I can't help but do a little bit of art direction side by side with an art director, but I do it respectfully. Like, I'm not going to be, I know what my position as a stylist is, but you can't help but do, you know, any experienced stylist will have a bit of an idea in creative direction anyway. But yes, you do. If they are purely commissioning you for the creative direction role or art direction role and styling, you have to charge them separately. They are two completely different roles. They're two completely different workloads as well. They're not, and I think this is a thing, and I'm not sure if you can agree with me, but I know early days of me styling, I took on so much of roles and time that I never charged out for.
Yeah.
I do feel like stylists are underappreciated in what we do. We we have incredible connections with people, relationships. We basically can source you anything that you need. And we have a wealth of experience that we're very happy to share. But yes, a lot of the time we aren't charging out correctly, or sometimes without experience, clients might not know the value. They might not see what you can bring to the table. But yes, if you have that knowledge, it is very important that you charge it out. And like, once you break it down for your clients too, they understand. Like, once if you're putting together a quote and you're saying this is art direction fee, and you're noting down all the different things that you're offering, they understand. They're like, okay, great, okay, I can see that. But yeah, it just depends. It depends on the job. It really depends on the client, really, what brand they are. Are they a big established brand? Are they not? Because if they're a small brand, they might not even have the fees to cover that as well. But yes, always
Yeah.
charge out for your time is very important as a creative.
Yeah, I think that that's where I very much, was learning when I sort of first went out as a freelancer. And because
It's so hard.
basically I was pretty much always doing art direction and creative direction and all of those things, but not necessarily charging for those things. And that's kind
Yeah,
of what
that's
I
very
really
normal. I
enjoyed
mean,
as well.
that's very much normal in our industry. I mean, you can never. It's a hard one. Like, you can't be like, oh, it's very hard to be like, say, like a lawyer and time for every minute that you're doing. But it is good to be like, okay, cool. I think this is going to take me about 8 hours of creative work just to get everything I need for my client to sign off, because your clients need to sign off on what you're doing. Rarely do you rock up to a shoot and go, by the way, this is what we're doing today. Like, so that initial time, that's your sort of creative process, and then you sort of move to the shoot, and that's a different stage. Because all I don't know if you agree, but I feel like all that, a lot of the not the hard work, a lot of the work in styling is actually the pre-production. The shoot
Yep.
day itself, it's all kind of come together. You're just sort of implementing the idea, really.
Yeah. And look, you're so short on time on a shoot day. There's often so much that you're getting through that if you're not going into it prepared,
Yes.
then, you're really doing yourself a disservice and you're going to struggle to get through the shots and you're going to
Yeah,
burn
that's right.
yourself out really quickly. So that was
That's right.
always something that I was big on. I would just do it for myself, even for my
Yeah,
shop Imprint House, I will like write a shot list and write like sketch. Okay, we've got to get, this light in this shot and this, so I know I'm going into something knowing exactly like everything that I need to do so that on that day, I'm not then, making those kind of decisions. All my decision capabilities are like
correct.
for like, how can I make this the best that it can be? Not
That's it.
like, oh, what are we doing next?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you have your plan and you're ticking off that list. And then I always like to allow for a little bit of time in a shot list to allow for creativity. So, because you might see something on the day and you're like, you know what, this angle looks really cool. Can we just quickly capture that? So always allowing a little bit of flexibility on your shot list. But yes, definitely having a pre-plan. So like you said, you go in there, you're prepared, Your client knows what to expect. You're also the team you're working with. So they, especially if it's a new team, you need to know what your expectations are of each other and what they're envisioning and you're envisioning, because you don't want to get there, especially if it's a tight schedule on the day and you're having those discussions on set, which are eating into time that you should really be shooting.
Yeah. And I get very frustrated when there's too much discussions going on. It's like, let's just
Well,
get
you wouldn't
through
like to speak with
the
me because I'm a real chatter.
work.
I am. I think I feel confident I can work quite well and chat at the same time. But I do love a little chat. But yes, good to get
I
all.
like that too, but like, when it's about like, what are we going to be doing as opposed
Yes,
to
that's
like,
right. Yeah,
let's kind of
it
do
should
it.
all be pre-planned. It should all be pre-planned.
So I'm curious about the sourcing part, which again, I feel like this might have changed a little bit. So I'd be really interested to get your take on it.
Yep.
So when I was doing, a lot of styling for obviously editorial, it's easy, people were on page credits, people were happy to, particularly in the times when I was doing a lot of that kind of thing, people were very happy to loan you product. Because editor was really king at that point. Things have obviously changed a lot since then in terms of now a lot of brands are really using it for social media. And even if it's a commercial shoot, and previously, if it was a commercial shoot, we would be allocated in a certain amount of budget to either buy the product outright or we would be loaning product. And it typically was then, I think, oh gosh, it's sort of like let's say 20 to 50% of the price of the product. I think mostly around 20%. But I'm
Yeah.
just curious what that looks like now in terms of if it's for a commercial client. So basically, you're working for a brand and you need to buy or get, various pieces. And you're talking about like some of them you're getting internationally and so on. What is that looking like in terms of how much of that are you buying outright? How much is it for, if you tag us, we're happy for you to use this, or is there a fee being involved in that?
So again, it depends on the sort of brand that it is. It hasn't, from what you're saying, it really hasn't changed too much. The higher fee. So for a commercial job, you are given an allocation that will be, or you might discuss an allocation together from experience, and that will be hiring and purchasing props. Because some props, obviously, if you're dressing talent or the consumables or something, you have to purchase. And then the editorial space is still the exact same. It works on a loan for exchange for credits. Um, you do find sometimes in interiors and certain, maybe more smaller brands, they're much more collaborative. So they are willing to, offer credits in exchange for product. So with the big commercial brands, it's very difficult for them to do because there's just so many people in the company. There's so many different, when they're really established, who they can align with, who they can't align with. But when it's the smaller sort of boutique brands, they're much more collaborative and you can work on loans and different agreements with different companies as well. So it really depends on who they are. One thing I have to note as a stylist, we don't own our copyright when it comes to image usage. So this is a huge thing with photographers. So you cannot promise your images to a brand for any reason, whether it's social media or not, without the photographer's permission and an agreement that you guys have together. So it's really important when you're sourcing for a company, if you want to work on any sort of loan basis, that you speak with the photographer and make sure that they're in agreement with you, and also that the client knows that as well, because you just can't promise unless you're capturing those products on your own iPhone or your own camera, and then you own the IP. But if not, you need to make sure you've got the permission. So that's always very tricky as a stylist. But yeah, loaning a loan, like a higher fee, is usually somewhere between maybe a 10, max 30%, depending on how many days you need it for. And obviously, when you hire those pieces, you want to make sure you're fully insured to be handling those pieces as well. And this is what I always say to myself, never handle a piece that I can't afford to pay for.
Yes.
Because as hard as you try and you take good care in things, sometimes just the fast pace of the nature of moving furniture in and out of a home or location, things can get damaged. So just always making sure, young stylists out there, that you are fully insured and don't handle anything that you can't afford to pay for, because I don't know, you need to eat. As
Yep.
much as you want that $10,000 chair.
Yes. And is that public liability insurance?
Yeah, so you need look, it's like personal to eat. You always should have public liability anyway, even as an assistant on a set, because I mean, you could be working in a multi-million dollar property and you could damage something very easily. You're not saying you mean to, but it might happen. And that's usually a requirement anyway of most stylists and agencies, is that you have at least public liability. Then when you're moving pieces yourself, you need public liability. You also need to have goods in transit. So that's actually the goods whilst they're in your vehicle or however you're transporting them. And then you also need to have insurance, which is like a goods in care. So that's when you are taking those goods out. Um, and, when you are loaning products, you just, I think also like younger stylists out there, like, if something gets damaged too, just talk to your supplier about it. Some might be happy to, you purchase it outright, you purchase it at trade price, or you pay for it to get repaired. So it's always good, you've got to be very respectful of your suppliers and retailers, because they are running, they're running a business too. And sometimes it is a big ask to take something off their shop floor for say, 2 to 5 days that they need it. So you're just making sure that you cover yourself when, you're loaning pieces as well is really important.
And what's generally the agreement these days behind the shipping of the goods? Because again, this was something that editorial. I mean, my experience, it always very much varied from brand to brand. Some people were like, they were so happy, they saw the value in getting editorial placement, and
Yes.
so they would actually, pay for it to go to the location, and even very nicely would, pay and organize for it to be returned. And other ones where like you've got to pay for it, obviously, or the client. Is that still pretty much the same from your experience?
Much the same. Yeah, it could be some people. I mean, it's probably fair for one to ship it one way and you ship it back the other, because it is a mutual, it's a mutual agreement. Both parties are benefiting. Like even from a photographer's point of view or a stylist, like me personally, I think I'm benefiting as well as the brand and as this other brand, because I'm able to work with beautiful pieces, which is able to, you know, be beautiful for the brand I'm working with. And then this also other brand gets exposure. That's the way I personally see it. I see it like a little like connection of supporting each other. But yes, I think it is fair for one person to ship it one way and then the other ship it back.
Yeah, that's what we would always try and do as
Yeah,
well, as much as possible.
I think that's pretty much how it is, unless it was something. I mean, like again, maybe you're requesting it from a small brand and they're just not in that financial position to cover the shipping or something. But I guess to your discretion, what you feel and what your budget is allocated for as well. How much?
And just yeah, and just on that, this issue, which you're right to raise, which is like the photographer owns the copyright on the images. Again, when I was doing a lot more commercial work, I always felt a little bit of a gray area, or tricky in the sense of, this is your work and you want to share it on your website, your portfolio, your social media. Obviously, the client also is licensing those images off the photographer to use that. So, do you tend to have a case by case situation whereby you discuss that with the photographer and or client in terms of being able to use those images as part of your portfolio on socials, on website? Or is it now the case that they actually want you to do it as long as you're tagging them, because then it's better exposure?
Yeah,
I'm just curious what the dynamic of that is.
think I think for me, I'm quite established now, so photographers and brands like to align with me and they like the exposure. Um, I think that now the thing is, it's legal, right? So legal is like really tricky gray area. The way I see it from like a collaborative point of view or a business relationship is, if you're working side by side with the photographer and you're both contributing to create the image, then I think that I would say legally, you also have a right to a copy of those images to use on your website or your social media. Now, obviously, everyone personally, photographers, they're all going to have different ways of how I mean, if someone listening to this, they might get a bit annoyed by me saying this, but I think it's like we are working together. We're both working just as hard to compose a beautiful image. Um, So I think, yeah, you should have a right to be able to use them on your social media and on your website. Most clients would be happy for you to as well. I've only ever had one experience in the whole of my career where someone took images from me to ban me from using them. And I mean, it worked out better for me anyway, so it doesn't matter. But yes, I
um,
think that having those, it's all about like having conversations early too, like expectations. So if you get commissioned for a job, you could have it in your terms and conditions saying like, could I please have, usage agreement that I can use these images on my social and my website.
yeah,
It's a very simple conversation that you can have. And they'll just either say, well, you hope that they say yes, because
yeah.
that would be, I think would be, personally think would be fair.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that it's so important to have these conversations before you start working, as opposed to, at the end of the shoot, and then you'll kind of feel like you're on the back foot, or it's a bit awkward to have that conversation, or whatever. Whereas if you're having it at the start, everyone's really clear about what the expectations are, and it just makes everything run much smoother.
Yes.
Now, I also want to ask, because I know that you do work with architects
Mhm.
and
Yes.
interior designers
Yep.
as well. And can you just run through quickly, like, what do those shoots look like in terms of how much of that are you propping? Again, like, are, designers and architects, are they allocating budget or for you to do that? Are some brands happy to just get an on-page credit for that? Does it vary much? Like, what, run us through what's that is looking like these
Yep.
days.
Yep. So, yes, I'm very fortunate to work with architects and designers, which I love. I love the blend of having the product and then going into interior spaces, because we are like, especially in Melbourne, we've got some beautiful properties here, and same in Sydney. Actually, Australia-wide, we've got beautiful properties, and it's just so nice to go into them. So they're kind of different to each other. Interior designer to architect is a little bit different. So if you're being commissioned by an interior designer, they're likely the properties are pretty much styled already. So they've got beautiful furniture items, beautiful artwork, beautiful vases and things like that. So you might only need to outsource small things, so small touches that maybe the interior designer didn't have the budget for, or also from a photo. It's a very different role from photographic interior styling to being an interior designer stylist is different. We're looking through things through a lens. So some objects that might be beautiful to live with aren't necessarily ones that are going to capture beautifully as well. So we might, zhuzh things and bring a couple of extra bits and pieces in that we know will photograph better. Um, so the bulk of it's basically there, and you're just coming in finessing, and you're working with the photographer side by side, capturing beautiful stills throughout the day. Architects can be a little bit different because they might not have actually commissioned for with their brand, with their client, the soft furnishings and the furniture. So you might have the actual homeowner's furniture in there, or you might have a selection of different, like, your big bulky items there, like your sofa, your coffee, your dining table, whatever, but they're missing rugs, homewares, cushions. And so when you take on an architectural client, usually that's what you're bringing in. You're bringing quite a large amount of pieces that just give it that elevated, homely, slightly lived in feel that suits the architectural firm. So you're kind of working with what's already there, because I personally don't ever shoot a blank canvas, something that's got no furniture in there, because it's a huge job. It's a very costly job. It's huge with your insurance risk too. Like, you're thinking you could be bringing in upwards of $100,000 worth of stock into a place. Um, so I tend to go for ones that have, some really nice key pieces to start with. Beautiful sofa, dining table, and you are bringing everything in. And those days are their big days. And then I guess, same thing, you bump it all in, you set it all up, working side by side with the photographer, capture what you need, and then you bump it all out, and no one will ever know you're there.
And you collapse into your sofa when you get home. um, I remember that feeling very well. Now, what does it look like in terms of, like we've touched on, you do some commercial, a little bit of editorial, working with the architects. What is the kind of the rough mix that you're doing, and how many shoots are you doing roughly every week? Do they tend to be day shoots, or like you say, some shoots are more 2 to 5 days? Like, you know, maybe say over the course of a month, because I know that each week would probably vary so much, but like on average, like what is the kind of like workload that you're doing, or the mix of client styles and shoots that you're doing?
So if we look, I'm going to look at it more of a year, over a year, because there's kind of like distinct periods that are very busy because you're going into sort of, it's like there's weather that you have to think of. So there's certain times of the year that architectural homes and interiors aren't that busy because the weather's not great. And then you've got campaign periods with your brands. So two sort of distinct periods with with your big brands, and then you really peak busy periods. What I personally do, I usually do what it seems to be 2 weeks roughly in the office where I'm designing and I'm concepting and I'm working through briefs and I'm planning with my team, to then I'm on set. And on set will be I'm on location shooting an architectural firm or an interior, or I'm in studio shooting for a brand, or I'm traveling interstate shooting something. So it sort of kind of like ebbs and flows like that. Like it kind of goes to busy periods in the office, busy periods on set. We have big established brands which we shoot probably there's probably like 5 of them that we shoot consistently throughout the year. And then there's the architectural firms and design firms which sort of slot in between there. And then there's sort of your like small boutique brands. Could be new clients that sort of come to you, and we just sort of slot them in the spots that we've got the time allocation for. And we somehow magically juggle them all and fit them all into a very tight time frame and make it all work.
And so, on a sort of on an average week, like would you be doing at least one shoot a week, would you say, on average?
Yeah, I'd say if you looked at it over, yeah, probably one. I mean, you could only do two. I could only do, because I've got to consider logistics and things like that as well on the back end of the business. But I could probably do 2 shoots a week for different clients that will say day shoots, or I have quite a lot of big clients where we're shooting multiple days. So we're shooting, say, a day to 5 days, or a day to 3 days, or something like that. Um, and then the other times are all that logistics, getting things back, picking things up, doing all the emails, file sharing, crediting, inquiries. Um, yeah, because you can't just be shooting well, you could be shooting all the time if you had an agent, but I'm self-represented. So if you had an agent, you could probably be shooting a lot because you'd have that extra support in the background. But I have my own, I guess we'll call it practice firm. And so I have to manage a lot of that
Let's
in-house.
just talk briefly pros and cons of having an agent.
Pros and cons. I mean, I've never had one, so I can't
Right. Okay, so
tell
why
you.
haven't you gone down that path then, I guess?
I think because I can hustle. I can represent myself and I can hustle. Like, I really do think that. Like, I'm quite comfortable if I see a brand that I think could really benefit from my experience, I'll happily reach out to them and share that, I'm happy to do that, to put myself out there. And also I feel as though I'm a really good communicator. So I'm very happy with dealing with my clients directly.
Yeah.
I think that's probably maybe one of the reasons why people would have an agent, is maybe they're not too confident in approaching people, or they're not confident in invoicing or quoting. Um, or also, if you are wanting to work on really big ad campaigns, or you're wanting to work international, it is a very good idea to have an agent, because they will be the perfect support to help you to establish yourself, to to learn from, to get you in front of the right people, because some brands only will go agent direct anyway. They wouldn't go for a smaller company. They want the big, they might be looking for, say, an artist or a creative, and they'll go straight to the agency, and they'll go, cool, we've got 10 photographers to choose from, 10 styles, and we're going to make our the right fit for our brand. So it really depends what you want. And I like being self-represented. I'm, like I said, I love communicating directly with my clients and building that relationship. That's really important to me. So yeah, I think that's, without having my own agent, that's probably all I could see the difference, really. I think they're both beneficial depending on your personality.
Yeah. No, I mean, for me, it was always I kind of got frustrated if I was on sets or shoots where there was just too many middle people.
Mm,
There's like you've got the
yeah,
agent and the clients and the and all that. So I was like, let's just
yeah,
have a conversation. Like just
yeah, muddy the water a little bit, and then you're kind of like, yeah, I do agree with that. It can happen. Um, but then again, in saying that, on really big campaigns, you can't do it all yourself.
oh,
So you need to have
completely, yes, yeah.
support
I
with
think
you, and
it
you need those different roles.
Yeah, I think it depends on, like you say, it really depends on which I didn't want to go down that path of if you're doing lots of commercial work and it's just a different kind of kettle of fish. So let's talk about your team because you've mentioned your team a couple of times. So what does that look like for you? How many, is it mainly assistants? Do you have any other people on your team? What does that look like for you?
So on my team, I have my a right hand lady who is Molly. So Molly's been with me for about 6 years now. So she's my main assistant, and then we've actually just put out a call recently, which I got so many inquiries for, which was amazing, looking for some extra hands on sets. So obviously, with the industry that we're in, it does ebb and flow a fair bit. So it's not like a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday sort of role for our team, but it's very flexible. So it does suit if the girls are, maybe a little bit younger or they've got other work commitments or they, are trying different things. It's a really good opportunity. But yeah, Molly's been with me for a long time, and it's really we're just a small business, really. We don't have a huge team with us. And then we usually will commission extra sets of hands depending on what the jobs are. So I have, a team that I work with in Sydney for when I don't have the allocation to fly out Molly. Um, and yeah, I mean, I've always had dreams of having a big business with a whole team, and we all sit in the morning and have a coffee and discuss our creative visions. And maybe one day that will happen.
Well, you never know.
You never
And
know.
what about in terms of the tools that you use within your business? So software programs. So when you're doing concept designs, I mean, I used to use InDesign because that's what I was using on magazines and I was very familiar with it. I've just
Yep.
more recently been going across to like using Canva. Are you using things like Canva or what are you using for your concept
And no,
designs
I
and
actually
other
moved across.
tools?
I just moved across to InDesign, believe it or not, because I was using Illustrator because I'm
Ah.
still chiseling away on a stone over here. But I always used Illustrator. Now I've gone to InDesign, which I really like. It's actually really good. I don't know why I didn't do it earlier. So the main things I use Illustrator, and I also use SketchUp. Like if I have a set design to do, I find that that's pretty like easy to use. Or sometimes I'll just hand sketch something if I can't really find the right reference or my skills are limited and I can't actually draw it up in a computer program. But they're really the main things I use from a creative point of view. And then we obviously use everything in Gmail, Google, so like spreadsheets, PDF docs. The PowerPoint presentations within our Gmail seem to be very popular. That's sort of like how the agencies will sort of deliver a brief usually. Um, and yeah, it's all pretty easy that anyone could pick up and use. I think that's nothing's too complicated, which I think is important because if I've got different team coming in and out, they need to sort of understand what we're doing. Like our schedule for our logistics is like very thorough. That's a big spreadsheet with lots of different information on there. And that's really the main tool that the team will have to be across to
Yeah.
make sure that we're operating a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, well, it has to be, doesn't it? Um, okay,
That's
I'm going to go through the final questions that I like to ask
okay.
everyone because it's always interesting to
Go for
find
it.
people's answers to these. So, first of all, which
Yeah.
5 words best describe you?
Okay. The first thing that came to mind is energetic. Energetic. I think I'm organized. I'm kind, ambitious, and quite adaptable.
All very good traits for a stylist.
Thank you. Yes.
Very important. What's the best lesson you've learned?
This is something my dad told me when I was younger. Could it be a lesson or a saying?
Yeah, either or.
Well, he always said to me, "Be kind to those on the way up because you never know who you'll see on the way back down."
Yeah.
And I kind of like I am like no matter who you are on our photography team in the day, everyone should be respected the exact same. No matter if you're a
Yeah.
photographer, stylist, assistant, runner, we are all of equal importance. The day doesn't happen without each other. So that's probably a really important lesson that my dad taught me. You know, just be kind to people. Obviously, if someone's being awful to you, you don't have to, like, I mean, you could be kind back, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just,
No,
yeah, that's
very
really
true.
important. I've learned.
What's your proudest achievement?
Birthing my daughter, that's, she's amazing. She's just the light of my life. So I think that was, you know, from a personal sense, it's definitely her.
What about career-wise?
Career-wise, I just think for being in business this long, you know, I've been doing this for 15 years and I still love it. I'm forever growing. There's like, you know, I'm always interested in the next thing, and I've got wonderful relationships with, you know, colleagues and clients. So I think that that's my achievement is just to keep you know, just to keep being a stylist and being in a business.
What's been your best decision?
Best decision on a work front.
Yeah, either or.
I think to become a stylist. I think it's actually for me, it's like it's my path. I like there are things I've thought that I could be doing, but I think I'm good at what I do, and yeah, it's my thing.
Who inspires you?
Well, obviously, in a work sense, you get inspired by other creatives, so you know other colleagues and the people you working with. On a personal sense, it's definitely my mum. She's a very strong person. She's had a lot of issues with her health, and she just keeps on pushing on, which is just incredible. So she's a big inspiration for me.
So your mum, and she had issues with her health. That's where you
Yeah,
finished?
she's
Yep.
been a bit unlucky with her health, and she just keeps pushing on. You know, she's just battling away, and yeah, just really proud of her. And it's just a really inspiring. It just makes you think of the quality of your life, and you want to just keeping on and enjoying it.
And what about, like, who are some of those creatives that,
Yes.
you really look up to in terms of, or they just inspire you? You're excited to see what they're doing?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. There's so many in Melbourne. Like, obviously, I love like Lily. I work with all the time, photographer Lily Thompson, Derek Spalwell, Sharon Cairns. They're all like photographers. Then we're looking at like interior firms, like Flax Studio is incredible, just always doing cool, fun, colorful interiors. There's international stylists like Callie Worsler. Like she's so different to me, but I just love what she does. It's just so out there and like just so wild. Um, and like, oh, I think you know what? We're like this big sponge, and I'm forever seeing so much cool stuff, like so much cool, like furniture designers and fabric houses, and you know, there's just too much probably.
I probably should have asked you this earlier, but how would you describe, and sometimes I know this could be a tricky one to answer,
Mm.
how would you describe your style?
Oh, my style. I think my style is quite simplistic, like it's uncomplicated. It's quite timeless, I would say. I don't think I mean, obviously I work with different brands, there's always trends, but yeah, I think it's quite like simplistic, elevated. Like I definitely think I help to elevate a brand or a product. And I don't know, it's quite recognizable. Like people always come to me and say, "Oh, we know that that's your image." So I'm not sure what that actually is, what that recipe is. But I would think, yeah, I think I'm just not too complicated with the way I place things. Everything sort of has a place and a purpose and is like considered.
Yeah. I think I always feel like it's a funny word to use, but I always feel like there's a bit of playfulness as well with what you create. Just the like the interplay, I guess, of the objects within the space. There's a sense
Well,
of
that's nice to know.
slightly playfulness there.
That's
Um,
good. Well, I have a slightly playful personality, so maybe that comes out in my styling.
yeah. There you go. We'll definitely we'll be sharing links to your socials and website and all
Yeah.
that stuff, so people can go and check it out for themselves if they're not familiar with your work. What are you passionate about?
I am passionate about probably just my life and like, I don't know, maybe leaving a little bit of a legacy. Passionate. I love my interiors. I love my job, my family, and just, you know, I don't know. I guess that's it. Just my life, just living a great life.
Sounds good. What dream do you still want to fulfill?
I would love to work overseas more. That's definitely something that I would love to experience. Um, I just think it's just such a big place, and there's so many incredible brands and spaces. So that's definitely something that I'll be chipping away with. I mean, it's a little bit tricky now because I've got a daughter, but my partner is extremely easygoing and flexible. So I'm sure that we will make it happen.
What are you reading? What's on your bedside table or on your coffee table?
I'm actually not reading anything because I'm a little bit time poor at the moment, but I have had this book that I bought that I really, really want to get stuck into. So it's called The Women's Brain Book by Dr. Sarah McKay. So it's just all about neurology, and she's incredible. I've, read a few things that she's written over the years, and she's really awesome. So that's definitely on my list. The minute I have some sort of downtime, I'll be picking that up.
What about, are you listening to any podcasts? What kind of things do you like listening to? Well, you said music, I think. Is it?
I do. I listen to a lot of music, like easily 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. at night minimum. I would be listening to music. My genre of choice would be anything electronic, more ambient kind of style, because it's sort of in the background as I'm working. I can't do podcasts when I'm working because I'd just be too distracted. But on a long drive, I'm big on Case Files. Bit dark, I know, but I love his voice and I love listening to his stories. Even though it freaks me out, then I can't sleep.
And that's like a true crime sort of podcast.
The true crime,
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, true crime podcast.
Yeah. And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I think it would just be probably to be really authentic. So not worry too much about what others are thinking, and following what's truly important that you want to be doing. I think that's the big takeaway, which I've always tried to do, but I know sometimes, we all get nervous about things and we aren't always true to what we believe in or want to do. But I think I would say that to my younger self. Just be confident and just, be true.
Yes. I know. It sounds so simple, and yet it's sometimes one of the hardest things to do.
So hard. And especially when you're young, I mean, I think we're pretty lucky that we didn't grow up with social media as heavily influenced as it is now. But, being authentic, it really does make you feel happier. You can't pretend to be somebody else, because later on it'll probably come and get you. You've got to be, your true self. And also, people love you for you anyway. They really do. Like, the right people love you for you. And they same when you work, being true to your own style and being your biggest advocate is important.
Yep. So true. Well, thank you so much, Bek. I really appreciate you really sharing your journey and sort of the inner workings of working as a stylist. I think so many people are going to get so much value out of this. So I really appreciate it, and really enjoyed connecting with you in this way. And thank you for being
really
on
nice.
the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for asking me too. It's been a really nice chat.
All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.